3 in the morning, and he's still staring at the ceiling. Not because of noise, not because of stress, because for the first time in his life, he has no idea who he is anymore. The job is gone. The relationship is gone. The version of himself he spent 10 years building collapsed in a single season, and nobody warned him it could happen this fast. He keeps replaying the same question. Not why did this happen? A darker one. What if this is just who I am now? That question is more dangerous than the loss itself, because losses end. Beliefs don't. Once you accept a label, you start living inside it like a prison you built with your own hands, and then forgot you held the key. Here's what nobody tells you about hitting bottom. It isn't the end of your story. It's the editing room. This is where the version of you that couldn't survive gets cut, and the version of you that can finally starts getting written. But only if you understand something Machiavelli understood 5 centuries ago. Watching empires rise and collapse in the span of a single decade. Fortune breaks people constantly. It doesn't ask permission. What separates the ones who rebuild from the ones who stay buried isn't luck, and it isn't talent. It's 7 specific shifts in thinking, and today you're going to learn all 7. Before we go further, understand this clearly. This isn't about becoming cold, or ruthless, or treating people without kindness. It's about controlling your mind when your circumstances refuse to control themselves. Real change never starts with your situation improving. It starts with your thinking changing first. So we start there, with your mind. Because everything else follows it. Drop I rise again in the comments before we begin. Sometimes saying it out loud is the first brick in a building you thought had already collapsed. Lesson 1. Stop identifying with your circumstances. Your situation is temporary. Your identity is not. Most people never separate the two, so a layoff becomes proof they're worthless. A breakup becomes proof they're unlovable. And one bad year becomes a life sentence they hand themselves without a trial. Machiavelli spent his career studying rulers who lost everything, and rulers who lost everything and came back stronger. The difference was never the size of the disaster. It was whether the person let the disaster write their identity or just their circumstances. A prince who loses a battle doesn't stop being capable of ruling. He simply lost a battle. The moment he tells himself he's finished, he becomes finished. Not because of the loss, but because of the story he told himself about the loss. Watch what happens when someone gets lost while driving. They don't set the car on fire because they missed an exit. They turn around. But when people get lost in life, they do something strange. They miss one opportunity, and they conclude the whole road is closed. That's not logic. That's a narrative running on autopilot. And it's running because you've repeated it enough times that your brain stopped questioning it. Here's the uncomfortable part. Your mind believes whatever you repeat most. Say I'm behind every morning, and you'll stop noticing the doors that are actually open. Say nothing works out for me, and you'll stop attempting the things that might. You don't even notice this happening. You just wake up one day loyal to a version of yourself that never asked for your loyalty in the first place. Think about the language you use without realizing it. I'm a failure is a sentence about identity. I failed at that is a sentence about an event. The first one sticks to your bones. The second one you can put down and walk away from. Most people never notice they're switching between the two, and the switch happens hundreds of times a day, each time reinforcing which version of the story wins. There's a reason certain people seem to fall apart and rebuild within months, while others stay stuck in the same wreckage for years. It's rarely about the size of what happened to them. 2 people can lose the same job, the same relationship, the same opportunity, and walk away with completely different internal conclusions. One decides the event revealed something broken about who they are. The other decides the event revealed something about that particular season, nothing more. Same circumstance. Two entirely different futures, built purely from the story each person chose to believe. Your current situation is a location, not a person. A traveler caught in a storm doesn't become the storm. Remember that the next time your circumstances try to convince you they're your permanent address. A location can always be left. An identity feels impossible to escape, which is exactly why so many people stay trapped in situations that stopped being true the moment they happened. Drop circumstances are temporary in the comments. Lesson 2. Accept destruction before reinvention. Nobody rebuilds a house without first clearing what's already collapsing. Yet people fight to preserve identities, habits, and relationships that stopped serving them years ago, simply because letting go feels like losing something, even when what they're holding on to is the very thing keeping them stuck. Machiavelli wrote that fortune favors those willing to adapt when the old strategy stops working, and punishes those who keep fighting for a version of the game that no longer exists. Growth almost always requires a death first. The old habits die. The old beliefs die. The old relationships that quietly limited you have to end before something stronger has room to exist. This is why painful seasons feel like punishment when they're actually demolition. Something in you had to fall apart before it could be rebuilt correctly. Think of a tree in a violent storm. The old branches snap first, not because the tree is weak, but because those branches were already dead weight the tree no longer needed. The storm isn't destroying the tree, it's pruning it. Notice how often people describe their worst season as the turning point of their entire life. Once enough time has passed, the friendship that ended forced them into a room full of people who actually respected them. The business that failed forced them to learn a skill they never would have bothered learning otherwise. The relationship that collapsed forced them to finally sit alone with themselves long enough to figure out who they actually were underneath everyone else's expectations. None of it felt like a gift while it was happening. All of it looked exactly like a gift in hindsight. The mistake most people make is trying to reconstruct the exact same life they had before, brick for brick, as if the goal were to undo the damage rather than build something better on top of it. That almost never works, because the old structure was already unstable. That's usually why it collapsed in the first place. Rebuilding the identical version simply guarantees the identical collapse somewhere down the road. Pain can make you bitter, or it can make you wiser. That choice belongs entirely to you. Take the lesson. Let go of everything that isn't the lesson. The people who rise fastest are the ones who stop grieving what fell apart and start collecting what it taught them. They treat the wreckage like a classroom instead of a graveyard, and that single shift in framing changes how quickly they move forward. Drop pain, build strength in the comments. Lesson 3. Rebuild your mind before your life. Most people try to fix their lives from the outside in. New job, new city, new relationship, and they expect the peace to follow automatically. It rarely does, because if your thinking stays the same, you'll carry the exact same fears into every new opportunity you create. Machiavelli believed the greatest advantage a person could have wasn't strength or luck. It was a calm mind in a room full of panicking ones. A clear head sees options, where a chaotic one only sees threats. It pauses before reacting, and that pause is usually the entire difference between a decision you're proud of and one you'll spend months undoing. Notice how many choices get made purely from feeling. People quit the moment they feel discouraged. They argue the moment they feel disrespected. They spend the moment they feel empty. None of that is discipline. That's emotional drift. And drift never builds anything that lasts. A life run entirely by mood ends up looking like a boat with no anchor, pulled wherever the current happens to be pushing that day. Strong people don't eliminate emotion. They simply refuse to hand it the steering wheel. When frustration rises, they slow the moment down instead of feeding it. When fear whispers that staying is safer, they ask whether it's protecting them or just limiting them. That single question, asked honestly, ends more bad decisions than any amount of willpower ever could. Your attention deserves the same protection. Every notification, every argument that has nothing to do with your actual life, every hour of scrolling, is competing for the same limited resource your future depends on. Think about how much of your day disappears into things you won't remember by tomorrow. A comment section you'll forget existed. A headline that changes nothing about your actual responsibilities. An argument with a stranger who will never think about you again after closing the app. Meanwhile, the 1 hour you could have spent building a real skill quietly disappears, and you wonder later why the year felt busy but produced so little. Ask what fills your mind daily and whether any of it is actually building you. None of this requires motivation. It requires small, repeated actions. Keeping the promise you made to yourself this morning, finishing what you started yesterday, sitting with an uncomfortable feeling for 60 seconds before reacting to it, instead of letting it dictate the next hour of your life. Every kept promise is proof your own word can be trusted. And that trust becomes the foundation everything else stands on. You don't build unshakable confidence by repeating affirmations in a mirror. You build it the same way you build muscle, through repeated small evidence that you can rely on yourself when it actually matters. Drop my mind leads in the comments. Lesson 4. Protect the environment that shapes you. Willpower alone rarely wins. Every single day, your surroundings are quietly pulling you somewhere, whether you notice it or not. The people you spend hours with, the conversations you absorb without realizing it, the content that fills the empty minutes of your day. Together, they're shaping the person you're slowly becoming. Machiavelli understood that no decision is made in a vacuum. Every choice is influenced by what surrounds it. A healthy seed planted in poor soil under no sunlight will never reach what it was capable of, and the problem was never the seed. The same is true for people who wonder why they can't seem to grow, while spending every day inside an environment, quietly working against them. Pay attention to the voices you hear most. Do they push responsibility, or do they only complain? Attitudes spread faster than most people admit. Spend enough time around people who blame everyone else, and eventually you'll start doing the same. Not because you're weak, but because human beings absorb the atmosphere around them without realizing it. Think about how differently the same person behaves in 2 different rooms. Around people who take responsibility and move forward, they start speaking about solutions. Around people who complain and stay stuck, the same person starts speaking about excuses within a single conversation. The environment didn't change who they are underneath. It simply revealed how powerfully surroundings shape which version of a person shows up on any given day. This doesn't mean cutting everyone out of your life. It means becoming intentional about who receives your time and energy. Some conversations leave you stronger. Others leave you drained for the rest of the day. Notice the difference and stop spending your limited energy where it constantly disappears. The same principle applies to your digital environment, maybe even more so, since it never sleeps and never stops asking for your attention. Waking up and immediately checking a phone means starting the day already reacting to someone else's agenda before you've had a single original thought of your own. By the time some people finish scrolling through breaking news and other people's opinions, They've already spent their morning energy on things that will not matter by the following week. Guard your peace the same way. Not every invitation deserves a yes. Not every argument deserves your attention. The strongest people aren't the ones constantly resisting temptation. They're the ones who built a life where temptation has less room to exist in the first place. That's the real skill. Not fighting distraction all day, but designing a life where distraction never gets close enough to fight. Drop "I protect my peace" in the comments. Lesson 5. Master patience. Real progress is almost always invisible before it becomes obvious. And that truth frustrates a world addicted to instant results. Every day you see someone announce a promotion, a new house, a sudden win, and it becomes easy to believe everyone is moving faster than you. Machiavelli understood that timing carries as much weight as action itself. A wise strategist never forces a move simply because everyone else is rushing. Many people confuse patience with doing nothing, but they aren't the same thing. Doing nothing is passive. Patience is active. It means continuing the work when no reward has arrived yet, and trusting the process without needing daily proof it's working. Think about learning any real skill. The first weeks feel awkward and slow. Mistakes pile up. It feels like nothing is happening. But underneath the surface, your habits are shifting quietly, one small adjustment at a time, until one day something clicks and the task that once felt impossible suddenly feels natural. People only notice the click. They never see the quiet weeks that made it possible. That's exactly why comparison is so dangerous. You see someone's finished result. You never see the years of failed attempts behind it, or the mornings they wanted to quit. Comparing your beginning to someone else's breakthrough will always leave you discouraged, and your timeline was never meant to match theirs anyway. There's a particular kind of frustration that hits during the middle stretch of any real change, long after the initial excitement has worn off, and long before any visible proof has shown up. That middle stretch is exactly where most people quit, right before the results were about to become obvious. Not because they lacked ability, because they mistook invisible progress for no progress at all, and gave up during the exact chapter where the real building was happening. One solid decision repeated daily will always outperform one perfect day followed by weeks of inconsistency. A person who reads 10 pages every night for a year will absorb more than someone who reads an entire book in one burst of motivation and then quits for 6 months. The math always favors consistency over intensity, even though intensity is what gets celebrated and consistency is what actually gets you there. Keep going. The results are already being built. You just can't see them yet. The same way you can't watch a tree grow in real time, even though it's growing every single day. Drop "I trust the process" in the comments. Lesson 6. Reclaim your self-respect. People treat you according to the standard you set for yourself. And that standard is set through small decisions, not one dramatic announcement. If you constantly ignore your own needs, people learn to expect it. If you accept less than you deserve long enough, that becomes the new normal you built with your own silence. Machiavelli believed respect is earned long before anyone offers it. It starts in the way you carry yourself and the limits you're actually willing to defend. Before the world decides how to treat you, you've already taught it what you'll tolerate. Chasing approval never ends, because no matter how much you give, someone will always want more. The strongest people stop chasing approval and start protecting respect instead. Because approval comes from pleasing people, while respect comes from standing by what you actually value. Those two things rarely arrive together. Think about how many decisions get made purely out of fear of disappointing someone, saying yes to plans nobody actually wanted to attend, agreeing with an opinion that felt wrong the moment it left the mouth, apologizing for something that never required an apology, simply to keep the peace in a room that was never actually at war. Each of those moments feels small individually. Stacked over years, they quietly teach a person that their own preferences don't matter as much as everyone else's comfort. This is where boundaries matter. A boundary isn't a wall meant to keep people out. It's a line that protects what actually matters: your time, your energy, your peace. Without it, every demand becomes your responsibility by default, and you end up exhausted without ever understanding why. The exhaustion isn't random. It's the direct cost of a life with no boundaries at all. Keep the promises you make to yourself with the same seriousness you keep promises to others. Every kept promise sends a quiet message. My word has value. That message becomes the foundation of real confidence, the kind that doesn't disappear the moment someone criticizes you, because it was never built on their opinion in the first place. There's a particular freedom that shows up once self-respect becomes non-negotiable. Conversations that used to feel terrifying suddenly feel simple. Relationships that only existed because you were too afraid to set a limit quietly fall away on their own without a single dramatic confrontation. The people who were only there for your silence tend to disappear the moment the silence ends. Drop "I choose respect" in the comments. Lesson 7. Build a vision stronger than your past. A clear future gives meaning to today's struggle. Without direction, small problems feel enormous. With direction, even difficult seasons become easier to carry because you know exactly what they're building toward. Machiavelli understood that every strategic move begins with knowing the destination first. Someone without direction doesn't make intentional choices. They simply react to whatever appears in front of them, and slowly, without any single dramatic moment, their life drifts away from the future they once imagined. Ask yourself an honest question. 5 years from now, who do you actually want to become? Not what you want to own. Who you want to be, calm under pressure. Dependable, disciplined enough to finish what you start. That answer matters more than any job title, because who you become determines everything you eventually build. Notice how differently two people respond to the exact same setback once one of them has a clear vision and the other doesn't. The one without direction experiences the setback as proof that nothing works. The one with a clear vision experiences the exact same setback as a temporary detour on a road they already know the destination of. Same event. Two completely different emotional experiences, purely because one of them knew where they were actually headed. Once that vision becomes clear, your daily choices start filtering themselves. Some habits lose their pull. Some distractions stop feeling worth the time, not because you forced yourself to resist them, but because your vision became louder than your temptations. You stop needing willpower for things that no longer align with where you're actually going. There will still be mornings when motivation disappears completely. Motivation was never designed to last. It was designed to get you started, nothing more. During those mornings, purpose is what carries you, because feelings change constantly, but a clear vision stays exactly where you left it, quietly pulling you forward, whether you feel like moving or not. Think about the difference between someone who wants a better life in general and someone who has actually written down, in specific detail, exactly who they intend to become. The second person makes faster decisions, recovers from setbacks quicker, and rarely gets distracted by things that looked exciting for a week and meant nothing a month later. Clarity isn't a luxury. It's a weapon and most people go through life without ever picking it up. Drop my future leads in the comments. If you've made it this far, you've probably realized something important. Feeling lost was never proof your story was ending. More often, it was proof you were standing at the beginning of a new one. Today you learned why your circumstances were never your identity, why destruction often comes before reinvention, why a disciplined mind builds a stronger life than motivation ever could, why your environment silently shapes every decision you make, why patience is quiet strength rather than weakness, why self-respect is set through small decisions rather than declared once, and why a clear vision outlasts any temporary setback. None of these ideas change anything on their own. Only the next decision does. Not a dramatic one. A small one. One better choice today. One kept promise tomorrow. Repeated long enough, those small decisions become an entirely different life, one that looks nothing like the wreckage it was built from. So don't wait to feel ready. Clarity rarely arrives before movement. It usually arrives after it, once you've already taken the first uncomfortable step and learned something the waiting never could have taught you. Start exactly where you are, with exactly what you have. One day you'll look back and realize the moment everything felt like it was falling apart was actually the moment everything started coming together. If this gave you something worth carrying, hit like so it reaches someone who needs it just as much as you did today. Share it with the one person you know who's standing exactly where you used to stand. Subscribe if you want more of this. And until next time, keep your mind clear, protect your peace, stay patient, and never let one difficult chapter convince you your story is over. Because the strongest comeback always begins with one decision. The decision to rise again.